Hey, it's Warren here from Produce Like a Pro. Hope you're doing marvelously well. And I'm with the great David Bendeth. How are you, mate?
I am great. How you doing today?
I'm good. Where are you, by the way?
It's a brisk New Jersey afternoon.
Oh, lovely.
It's supposed to be snowing, but it's about 55 degrees. And on Saturday, it's going to be 65 degrees. So global warming, who knows?
Well, mate, I used to live in Carlisle in the north of England, and they're the town in England that's going through those massive floods. I don't know if you've seen that on CNN and the news and stuff. Yeah, it's insane. Weather patterns are definitely in a big mess, but let's not have a debate about that, because that will be the only topic at the bottom of this video will be climate change. Look, so those of you who don't know David is frankly incredibly successful, and I think the reason primarily why I'm most excited to talk about you and to you, frankly, is you are what I would class as a survivor, a guy that has morphed with this. You know, I don't want to say that you're older than 21, but let's just say you've had you've had an amazing career. I mean, when did you start?
I start music or recording?
I suppose both.
Probably 7.
Oh, wow.
You know, I was really, really lucky to grow up in England in the 60s. And 2 things were happening. One of them was great, English artists, the Shadows, Cliff Richard.
Sure.
Jerry and the Pacemakers, all of that. It was just an amazing time, the beginning of rock and roll and bands. And at the same time, in England, it was like Nat King Cole, Frank Sinatra, Nina Simone, all of these artists that from America.
Yeah.
And so we had both of these things all coming in at the same time. So my first singles were like really weird. Like it went all the way from like Helen Shapiro, Walking Back to Happiness was I think my first single, straight to Rawhide.
Oh, yes.
Theme. So,
fantastic.
It was like, it was just an interesting, really, really interesting time. And, obviously there was no internet back then or anything else. So we would just buy 45s. That was the big thing. And, look at sort of 60s Fender Stratocasters in the shop window down on Shaftesbury Avenue. And it was just really like just about to happen, the whole insurgence of the Beatles and the Stones. So, my mother especially was a big music fan. She played piano, and she would buy a lot of records. So I got to listen very early to a cross of all that, and of course symphony music, which was her first love.
Wonderful.
And then we moved to Canada, which I don't know. My father decided to move us to Toronto. He didn't like Britain too much anymore, and of course. Then it was the Beatles and the Stones, and of course right around probably 13, 14, I bought my first Jimi Hendrix and Cream album.
Wonderful.
And that was it. It was over. I was going to play guitar.
Sure.
I was going to save my money, and I wanted to be a guitar player. And I bought the Yardbirds and Dylan and all that stuff.
I relate to all of that. Yeah.
So straight from that until a friend of mine around 16, 17, he says, "You're listening to a bunch of garbage. Stop it." I said, "What are you talking about? This is the best music in the world." And he says, "No, you got to get really stoned and listen to this record." And he was a Jamaican guy, bass player.
Yep.
Sat me down. He says, "Just sit in the corner with my headphones and smoke this big spliff and listen to this record." And it was Miles Davis, Bitches Brew.
Oh.
And I had never heard anything like that.
Yeah.
It sounded insane. And I was like, who's the guitar player? And who's the piano? And of
John
course,
McLaughlin.
that was the beginning.
Yeah,
It went Wayne Shorter to Miles Davis to John McLaughlin to Billy Cobham. I mean, Herbie Hancock. By the time I listened to that record, it was the best sell job I've ever had. And then, of course, the whole world opened up immediately to all those influences of jazz and rock.
Fantastic.
And I got really snobby about it, which is what you did back then, when it was like...
Yeah, I think that's part of the journey. I think for all musicians and engineers, producers, songwriters, you have to go, well, not have to, but a lot of us go through that kind of period of loving real musicality. But then we can still be those guys that love the Clash.
Right, right. Well, that's what happened. I left home right after high school, straight back to England by myself. I was supposed to go to college, never came home, and got a job in a record store in Haymarket Corner in London. And, from there on, it was like, let's play gigs. Like, we got to make some money here. So I was there in the 70s, 73, 74, 75, the most exciting period of, the AC/DCs, all those records that came out. And I was there. And I met a lot of people and learned how to play guitar from other people. And big Jeff Beck fan.
Huge Jeff Beck fan, yeah.
Saw him about 30 times back then with Beck, Bogert, and Appice and the Jeff Beck group, and of course the Faces, Rod Stewart, Ronnie Wood. It was just such an amazing time to be there. I'm very lucky. I think I was at the right place at the right time.
I agree, yeah.
And then back to Canada, and then back to New York, and then I started my own recording. And it was a rough lesson because recording is not playing live. And exactly. I had this English producer that got divorced halfway through my record. And he was the guitar player in that band, the Tornadoes. Remember that song, Telstar?
Of course.
He was the guitar player, Alan Caddy. And he left. Before he left, he says, you should record, because I was doing an instrumental album, because I was, of course, the best guitar player that ever lived. If you asked me, I would tell you. And
every guitar player is.
At that point, I was getting a name for myself. I had Billy Cobham and Lenny White and Marcus Miller on my first album.
Wonderful.
And I was like 19. So I'm like spoiled rotten. And the producer says, you should record a vocal song just for fun. And I said, really? Why would I do that? He says, well, because you could have a record on the radio. I said, okay, I'll just try it. So I went in and recorded one vocal song. And of course, it comes out in the UK and goes straight to number one.
Fantastic.
Which was, at a very young age. And then I toured. I toured for 10 years. And then I, obviously started production probably around 28, 29. I was really not that good at it. I definitely hated mixing. But I was the kind of kid that had to learn from multiple mistakes and ask a lot of questions. And I was lucky enough to be around some fantastic producers. Bob Ezrin and Aretha Mardan. I worked in a studio in Toronto called Phase One. We all came out of the studio. It was Randy Staub, and it was Garth Richardson, and it was Scott Humphreys and Rich Chicky. We were all there at the same time. Bill Kennedy and Jack Richardson, Bob Ezrin. So it was like a school, and tape, of course, and we assisted and we produced and we tried to mix on an SSL. We made a million mistakes.
Sure.
And it was fantastic. It was really, a great place to be again. I was very lucky. And then I went to work for a record company because I was broke at 30 and just started producing. And I never looked back from then. It's sort of been, I've always been in the studio, I think my whole life. In my mind, I was in the studio writing whatever I was trying to do. And then I feel like, I want to say like 45, because I'm old now, that I actually started to mix things I liked. And it was very frustrating because, and I'm sure you remember this more, like you would mix something and give it to someone and it would come with a totally new take on it. And everybody went, oh, this is fantastic. And you'd be going, no, it's not. It's not what I wanted it to be. What have you done to my song?
Yeah.
Until you've earned that right to be able to speak up, it's kind of like you just better shut your mouth until you really know what you're doing. Yeah. So you sort of say, well, there's something wrong with it, but I don't really know what that is.
Yeah. No, I completely understand. I relate to that. I'm glad you're on this topic because I was going to stop you when you mentioned that hated mixing, because I went through the same thing, because you're tracking stuff and committing things to tape the way you want to hear them, and then you pull them up on the console and you're like, the record's done. And then the label's like, whoa, who's going to mix it? You're like, what do you mean? This is how I wanted it to sound.
Yeah, and then, of course, you give it to, and back in the days, back then, and I'm sure you remember this, they would give it to 5 different mixers.
Oh, yeah.
And they would, pick the one they like, because there was a lot of money for mixing, not like today, where they pick 1 or 2 guys. So that was really interesting. You sort of hear your song back, and it would sound like completely different. And then you had to sort of adjust to it because eventually it did come out that way.
Yeah.
And it was released that way. And there was sort of this, well, I hope it does well, but at the same time, this feeling, this burning feeling inside that if it failed, it was your fault because it really hadn't reached fruition creatively. Sure. So I started to mix out of what I call desperation.
Yeah.
And of course, when you're desperate, you lose things like bottom end, bass definition, top end, reverb, all of the things that those guys have been doing it for 30 years know how to do better than anybody because it's a formula. And I sort of decided back then if I was going to be any good at mixing, I wanted to make every mix I did sound completely different than the last one to basically screw the system. Because
show them.
Well, it was like, Chris Lord-Alge has a sound, and you're like, yeah, well, who cares? It's just a sound. But because my heroes would make a Peter Gabriel record, a Kiss record, a Genesis record, or an Average White Band record and a Bee Gees record and a Scritti Politti record, and none of them would sound anything like each other.
Sure.
So I thought that there was something brilliant in that. And I think sort of once the mixers got a hold of things started to become somewhat formulaic, and it was a radio thing that everybody was after.
Right.
So then there was the dream, of course, to get your own studio, and I'm looking at you, with all your gear and an SSL, and in a way, and I think you'll agree with me, it's like a license to kill. It's like, because you don't have to worry about someone saying, we'd like to spend more time on the mix, but to be honest with you, we just don't have the money.
Yeah.
Or the band's not available. And I can't come to the studio, says the A&R guy. And you're like, you know what? Don't worry about it, because I'll do it on my own. And when you have that ability, I think it's a license to not bring time into it anymore.
Right. Yeah.
And we know that time and music don't go well together. So the ability to have your own room, I think, really allows you to be more creative.
Absolutely, and I couldn't agree more. The reality is, whatever your home studio situation is, obviously we're blessed with 20, 30, 40 years worth of acquired equipment, which I think is, for anybody starting now, I mean, I couldn't do this again because there's but I've acquired all this equipment. But even if you've got a small home studio setup, the reality is you're in this wonderful flexible world where you're like, I don't like that guitar part, I'll just redo it.
Yes.
As opposed to, look, I've got to book the studio, see if it's available, call the sessions player, see if he's available on the one time that the day, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, we've got this beautiful license, like you said, license to kill now, where we can just, if I don't like something, I literally just pick up the guitar, which is behind me, plug it in and replay it.
Absolutely.
And I can be mixing, I can redo the guitar, I can go in and add the tambourine part at mix stage, and just make it great.
After the mix.
Yeah, after the mix. Yeah, the famous Elton John story, isn't it? Where at mastering, he puts a background vocal down. I can't remember what song it was, but I read that somewhere in Mix magazine or something.
Mastering is always a sore subject with me on a personal level, and it only becomes a sore subject as a mixer or as a producer when you try and do it yourself. Because it's very, very interesting, because today mastering kind of means to a lot of people at home, make it louder, because it's almost like mixing in the sense that you really have to know your settings. And most mixers in the world that are any good are the worst mastering guys in the world. They have no clue on how to do anything with mastering. And it sounds terrible.
Yeah.
And when I go to the pros to master, it's almost like they reach blindly for things, and I say, what are you doing? He says, we're just turning it till it sounds good. And of course they know because they've done it 10,000 times.
Yeah.
So I stay away from that. And I'm very glad I am staying away from that.
Yep. No, I understand. Yeah, no, when people come to me to do projects, sometimes they don't have the budget to use a great mastering guy. The one thing I will say, and this is just personal, I think unless you're going to use a great mastering guy, then I'd rather just do it. I will master it so it's louder and more consistent. You know, I can do it as good as any other low budget guy and probably better. But there are real guys out there. You know, I've used them all. I'm sure you have as well. I'm a big fan of Adam Ayen, Steve Markison, Ted Jensen, you know, Bob Ludwig. All the great guys are wonderful. Howie, you know, all those guys are in an echelon of just, they've done, like you said, 10,000 plus songs, and you're paying for that acquired knowledge. They're not learning it. They really know what they're hearing, and they know their rooms and their settings and their equipment. And I agree. Those are. I'd much rather do that if the budget permits. But unfortunately, in the world we live in, it's tough.
It is tough.
Yeah, because the $2,500 to master an album for one day's work is a pretty hard sell for a kid who's, you know, doing an album in a week.
Yeah, then the expectation should be realistic.
Yeah. So, I'm intrigued because I know you've got tons of gold and platinum records, and I actually see some on the left there. But what's the Elvis one? Oh,
Elvis 30 number ones.
What did you do on that?
I mixed it and produced it.
You did?
Yeah.
So tell me.
Oh, it's pretty well documented. I mean, I went to, Iron Mountain, got the original tapes.
Yep.
Took it into Hit Factory for 6 months.
Wow.
And mixed it.
That's wonderful. Not many people can say that.
No, it was an experience of a lifetime. Obviously, we didn't mix the mono tracks because they're unmixable, but I did all of the multi-tracks. So 2, 3, 4, 8, 12, 16, 24, and dig.
And digital. Wow.
Yeah. There was one, a little less conversation, which was the single, and I did 5.1 of the whole album as well. So it was in DVD surround.
Oh, that's amazing. Not many people can say they worked with Elvis.
Well, I didn't work with Elvis. I
with Elvis's music. How about that?
I did. I was my job at first was I was told to put the record together, not to mix it.
Right.
And then somebody said to me, well, you need to make this sound better. And I didn't tell anybody what I was doing, to be honest with you. I just took it into the studio and started messing with it. I took Burning Love in and just went crazy on it. And somebody came up to me and said, you can't do that. You're not allowed to. So get that idea out of your head. It's never going to happen. I said, okay, well, don't worry about it. I tried. And they went down to the estate and played it for them. And the estate went crazy and said, we want this guy, whoever did this, to do the whole album.
Wow.
So that was it. So I did the record, and it's Elvis's biggest record. 30 number one hits. It was 2002.
That's amazing.
It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, that's well. Thanks for sharing that. I love that. Yeah, I was just looking around. I saw all the albums. I recognized everything, and I'm like, Elvis?
Well, there's a couple you haven't seen, like Dumb and Dumber.
That's great. Dumb and Dumber, and that's the pinnacle of your career.
Well, that's me after I think I'm really good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, well, that's what we all need. I mean, a good dose of humility. It's funny. I'm talking to Jack Douglas a few months ago. He's a good friend of mine, an old friend, and I interviewed him here at the studio. And he's teasing me because he's like, produce like a pro. He goes, when I was making records in the 60s and particularly in the 70s, he goes, the last thing we wanted to be was professionals. And that's really kind of the truth. It's like, I love doing this YouTube channel and I love talking to people because what I like to do is open the doors and realize that it's just guys like you and I that love music and we don't have fixed ideas. We don't know. We're just in there. Like you said, you're messing with some stuff, some Elvis tracks, and they hear one of these songs and they fall in love with it and go, keep messing with it. I mean, that's really kind of what happens. the experts are the people we're not the experts. The experts are other people.
I had an amazing experience at the end of that record I want to share.
Please.
One of my heroes in life was Arif Mardin.
Right.
I just felt like Arif got it. He was an amazing arranger, an amazing producer, an amazing mixer. And I decided at the end of the record to call him in to listen to a mix of Elvis, because I said to him, I need a quote for Billboard. And would you come in and listen to a song? He says, of course. I live down the street. I was at the Hit Factory on 55th. 55th. So he comes over and he sits down. He says, play me a song. So I play Burning Love. And he says, turn it down. It's too loud. Let's turn it down. And he's listening to it. And I'm really nervous because it's a reef, right? I mean, it's not like it's a reef. So I get to the end of the song and he looks at me and he said, David, it's fantastic.
Oh, wow, that's beautiful.
Isn't it amazing? And I'm like, yeah, and I'm very happy because he said, it's amazing, it's fantastic. He goes, David, it's fantastic that if you listen to the end of that song, it goes on for 1.5 minutes and the drummer doesn't speed up. And immediately I was put in my place.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And he said, this music was made long before you or even knew anything about music. So he says, you should be honored, to be a small part of it now. But remember, you didn't record this or mix it.
Sure.
And it was, because you get on a high horse with anything you do. But it's always great to get slapped down to earth.
Yeah.
And it's always good to get a reality check. And as much as I'm proud of that record, I'll never forget what he said to me, that it was amazing that those musicians could play like that and Elvis could sing like that, because that's the truth. And I think producers and mixers sometimes forget that we're just, we're the support staff. Yeah. We're not the show.
Definitely not. Yeah, Dave Jordan, that's a wonderful story. Thank you. Dave Jordan has, he said to me once, I've mentioned this a few times before. He's like, sometimes you have to get in there with the band and pull the songs apart and rework them and do so much stuff. And other times you just got to get out of the way of the band and help them make a great record.
It's funny you said that. Arif said that about Norah Jones when he won a Grammy. I called him. I said, congratulations. He'd been fired from Atlantic. And it had sold, I think, 15 million copies. I said, Arif, it's fantastic. He said to me, David, I did nothing. She's a fantastic singer. I just sat behind the console and she looked at me and I would go like nod, and that was all I needed to do. Sometimes you need to know when to shut up.
Yeah. I agree. That's beautiful. Hey, can I get you can you pick that up and go into the studio, maybe check that out for a bit of backdrop?
We can give that a shot.
Perfect. That'd be exciting. Just with some different backdrop while we're doing this.
Okay. Yeah. Hang on.
We're walking down the corridor here.
We're going down the corridor of. Hang on. Are you still there?
I'm still here.
Okay. This is my lounge.
Beautiful.
I made this habit of getting bands to sign drum heads.
What a nice idea.
And so they have to write nice things. Because if they write something bad, all the other bands will see it. And that's my favorite thing to do at the top there. That's fishing.
Oh, it's not the one where you press a button and the tail moves?
No. This is the live room. It's pitch black. Hang on.
Thanks for giving us this guided tour. Oh, what a beautiful live room. Dang, you've got a real live room.
And a tiki bar.
Wow, that's a real live room. You got me beat by many hundreds of square feet.
we're just mixing now. There's no band in here. So that's the room. And there's like, we sometimes eat dinner in here, but sometimes it's not that great because it gets cold.
Sure.
With the air conditioner.
Is your kitchen?
Kitchen, shower, library.
Was this a studio already, or did you build it?
This was Whitney's. Whitney Houston.
Oh, fantastic.
So this is where she did her first 3 records. This is like the vocal booth. There's some amps.
Right.
Some pedals. And then I think this goes through. Whoops. Don't do that. Oh, I'll fix it. I'll fix it in a minute. Boop. And then this is Studio B.
Is this like your kind of edit, overdub suite?
Yeah, this is like an edit overdub room.
Great.
You know, it's just, I do bass.
We're going to have to find an excuse maybe next year when we're at, a conference out there to come in and come do a little guided tour and film it properly. That'd be amazing. We'd
love that. I want to show you something funny.
Please.
Because you're probably like me if you're from the old school. This is the library.
Oh, wow.
But
tapes. Christmas stuff.
Recall sheets.
You've got all your track sheets?
Everything from every project going back 15 years.
That's great.
So I keep a real record of everything. Just in case I like something I do, you know, like, and it doesn't happen a whole lot, magic, but you want to remember. It's important.
I agree. You're like, how did I get that guitar sound on that record 12 years ago? Go look it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's important to document. I really do. Not everybody has a photographic memory. As we get older, we just don't remember as well.
Yeah, I don't think I ever did. So there's your SSL. You've got all VUs. Very nice.
Interview for a minute. Just starting a mix.
Who are you working with?
Courage, My Love, they're called.
Great. A lot of nice stuff. Blue Stripe 1176. Got some 1073s there.
Original.
Very nice.
Hoopla song. Yeah.
Great. Oh, look, an old Space Echo.
Yep.
And an AMS. So you're firmly in the world where you're mixing. Oh, I see. Apogees. And you're like me. You're working hybrid. Is that correct? You're sort of mixing in the box and the console at the same time.
Well, most of the time it's on the console, right? Because the console's turned on. I use the computer. I'm using automation, so all the faders are moving.
Great.
There's a couple of guitars here.
Great.
This one's a cool one. Like this one.
That Beck Strat?
61.
Oh, 61. Beautiful. Beautiful.
What else is in here? I mean, that gives you the idea of the room.
Great.
So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rooms. Oh, now I've got 2 other rooms in the front.
So let's talk about your process, because I think it would be really cool for people to understand a couple of things that are very unique. And that's your DAW choice and your computer choice, because I think that's very important, because I find that a lot of people that watch Produce Like a Pro aren't using Pro Tools, aren't using Macs, and I would say the vast majority of people don't. and they're split between Studio One, Reaper, and in your case, particularly Nuendo. And they're running PCs as opposed to Apple computers. And it's more affordable, it's easier to expand. And I feel like sometimes they feel alienated because they're just coming up against like professionals talking about Apple, which we all love, of course, and Pro Tools. When the real world is like, I made an album with Paul Gilbert a few years ago, who's an amazing guitar player, as you know, and we did it on Nuendo and a PC. And that's what you use.
Well, the theory is every studio has Pro Tools in the world. Okay, got it. Most of them do. Studios, I'm talking about this, like this. And then at home, people use whatever they can afford. People make fantastic music on Logic. They make great music on Cakewalk. It really doesn't matter. I'll tell you why I switched. I started in 92 on Cubase and a Mac. That's how I started Cubase. And one of my guys in about 1999, maybe 2000, built a computer from Windows, a PC, and he used Windows. And I realized immediately it was faster than the Mac.
Wow.
And that was the beginning for me. It was like, well, wait a minute. You can't expand this Mac. You can't do it. This is it. You buy it and that's it. And Pro Tools, you have to go with whatever version you've got. And I found it incredibly inhibiting creatively. And then Nuendo kicked it up. And they started to come up with a lot more editing options that were faster. And you as they did it, you got faster. You sort of rebuild the computer to adjust. And then another reason I thought was really cool would be like nobody could ever come into my studio and use it. You said I'm in the box. Literally, I'm in the box, but when I'm mixing I'm using the console.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the computer's on. Most people today don't even turn on the computer with an SSL. Right. They just put everything and mix it in the box through the SSL. So you don't really even need an SSL. You just need 10 strips. Right. So I realized that having the speed and having that system worked for, and basically the kids would come to me out of school with Pro Tools knowledge and they'd have to start all over again, which I really, really liked because then you could see how great they were going to do on a PC and Nuendo. And they were like, well, wait a minute, I just spent 4 years learning Pro Tools. And you're like, right, but we don't do that here. So you're going to have to learn how to do this. And you see the adaptability. And you'd also see their own creativity. Each guy that ended up working with me, that was an engineer or an assistant engineer, would bring their own sound to that, bring their own technique to it. Whereas I felt with Pro Tools, it was limiting. I'm going to be one of these people that I'm going to get blasted for this.
No,
but I think it sounds different.
No, I really do. I think it's really important to have very strong opinions. I am very, very passionate about people being passionate. The mastering engineers, you go to a mastering engineer, they buy like these really crazy esoteric pieces of equipment. And if you think about it rationally, you're like, wow, they have like $5,000-$10,000 pieces of equipment that they barely touch a knob on. And they have these massive explanations why they love them. But you know what? That's why they're mastering engineers. It's because they're so passionate about it. And so I believe that what you're saying, and if it works for you and it makes you make great music, that is more important than anybody's opinion about what's right and wrong. Because, when I first used Nuendo with Paul Gilbert, I honestly thought it sounded better than my 888s. Because remember we had 888s in those days?
Yeah, of course.
So they came out and they made these better IOs. Now, I haven't used it since, but in those days, I can tell you categorically that his Nuendo system, which also cost a fraction of the Pro Tools system, sounded better than my Pro Tools system.
Well, I believe it does. I think it's just a different top end. It's not so harsh. Having said that, like I said, I listen to In the Box mixes by, who's the guy that mixes for Trent Reznor? That kid.
I don't remember.
He's amazing. His stuff in the box is insane.
I'm sure.
And So I think it's just what your workflow is, what you're used to.
Absolutely.
My setup is based on Andy Wallace because I'm a big Andy Wallace fan. I think Andy Wallace is unreal. And when I worked with him 3 or 4 times, and every time I walked in the room, I'd leave scratching my head going, he's not using anything.
Yeah.
There's no gear on.
Yeah.
It's just his head on the console.
Yeah.
It's how does he do that? How does that reverb sound like that? How does the bass sound like that? And you turn around, there's nothing on behind him.
Yeah, he's not using any outboard, yeah.
And I said to him
Except
one day...
Except for an SPX90.
Well, I have one right there. So I said to him, why is it? He says, there's less to go wrong.
Nice.
There's less to go, there's less pieces of gear to burn out. There's less things to worry about. And
less things to recall.
Less things to recall. So I was like, well, wait a minute, that's smart. I mean, if you can make something sound that incredible, you put on Linkin Park or you put on Limp Bizkit and you listen to that record and you go,
Nevermind.
That was done with Nevermind. That was done with hardly anything.
Yeah.
Wow.
Jeff Buckley, Grace.
Jeff Buckley's Grace.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of respect, and I look at his discography, and to this day, it blows my mind. So to me, I think he is the pinnacle of rock mixing for me. I'll probably get a lot of arguments, and I agree, but you go back and look at his discography, and there's Whitney Houston there as well. It's not just rock music. Andy Wallace can mix anything.
Yeah, and he mixes very quietly.
And very, very quietly, which I also do. So he said to me one day, he says, if you can listen to the mix while you're working, he says, if it sounds really loud and you're really quiet, he says, you're doing something right.
I like that. Yeah, I like that.
And I like that too. He says, you got to be able to hear everything at low level. Of course, as you know, on the SSL, you come back to that spot and you only get the left side.
Yeah.
On the volume, right? On the NS10. Which is another thing, we can talk about gear forever. But at the end of the day, you and I are working on 1910 technology of I'm looking at your speakers, the technology for the NS10 or any of these speakers hasn't changed since 1910.
Yeah, my poor old NS10s don't get much of a workout anymore. I'm so used to my Genelecs that I've had for so long, All
right. But the technology is...
Absolutely, yeah.
So here we are spending $5,000 on a compressor, but we're putting it through a $2,000 speaker.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we go into an MP3, which is even more insane.
Yeah.
So that's the key. I think the key is to, when it ends up at an MP3, that it still sounds unreal.
Yeah. That's
always been the challenge now since the digital age.
Yeah, we're in a crazy world with that stuff. It's so the Nuendo, so the PC Nuendo thing, I think is really, really. I love that you work in that. When I first started talking to you, I didn't actually know you were working on that, and I feel like this is a message that I think is so important for people. That it is knowing your equipment, knowing how to get the best out of it is more important than really the equipment whatsoever.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's also knowing the room. I think today there's a huge challenge with working on a computer. You're sitting there, your speakers are in front of you, and you're in the middle, and everything's coming at you. The SSL, you can kind of go down and fix the drums, and you're getting a different perspective on the right speaker if you're at the left. Yeah. And I think it's that full dynamic range that you're getting at different parts of the room. I think that's why the SSL is so interesting, because you're not just sitting in front of it unless you're mixing on your sub channels. I love the ability to be able to move around while I'm listening to music and get a different angle. Yeah. Sometimes I play my mix and close the door just to see if I still think it's any good. That's always the best test.
I've heard that from a few people saying that they'll leave the room and go and listen from a different room. Yeah.
Yes, I do that. I do that.
I think it's pretty admirable. Yeah.
Well, you want to know if it still stands up, if you can still hear it clearly, even though it's from another room. What you do first is just play something that you already know from the other room, just to make sure your ears are tuned into what it is.
Only you know how to use your room? I understand that.
I would not want anybody. I mean, if we literally turned on the SSL Ultimation, and PC and Windows, I doubt many people would know how to do all of those three things, at the same time, which, to be honest with you, I'm not really that great at myself. Right. Because I think you're always, like young kids today, how would they know about an SSL? They would have to have gone to a school or interned at a place with a console.
Yeah, absolutely.
But as I said, most consoles today are not real. The computer's not turned on. It's just there.
Right. We're running out of space. Ted?
By the way, you give a great interview.
No, you've been awesome. I really appreciate it. And just so anybody watching this knows, we had a little technical difficulty at our end, not David's end, where we filled up our hard drive without realizing it. So there's a lesson.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lesson for all of us out there: is make sure you have enough space on your hard drive before conducting extensive interviews or recordings. So anyway, I just wanted to wrap up and say thank you ever so much. I love this because we're just talking about making music. For everybody who doesn't know David, I'm sure everybody does, but if they don't, I'm going to put the AllMusic link underneath, which will give you tons of ideas of just how diverse.
Not that. Don't do that. That's the worst place in the world.
Where's the best place to get the credits?
Oh, just go to Wikipedia.
Go to Wikipedia. Okay, the Wikipedia link's going to be underneath.
They have, I was speaking to Ted Jensen. I think they have half of his projects.
Oh, I know. They have probably half of my projects as well.
Yeah.
But it's still, there's still a lot of projects.
Still a lot of projects. Yeah. Well, it happens when you get really old, Warren. You'll see down the line.
But anyway, so we'll put a link. You've made some incredible sounding records. We have an incredibly good friend in common, Sean Hurley, who was the bass player for Vertical Horizon.
Did he ever tell you how he got that gig?
No. Tell me quickly.
Oh, well, yeah, of course. No. Well, the guitar player's mother was shopping at a supermarket. And she ran into Sean Hurley's mother because she was shopping. And she says, my son's looking for a bass player. She says, well, my son plays bass. And that's how he got the gig. You ask him.
Oh, wow. I'm going to. And for those that don't know.
His mother got him the gig. So you tell Sean Hurley his mother's his best agent.
I'm sure he knows. Whenever I do a record, the only person guaranteed to buy it is actually my mother. But I will say, Sean is one of the sweetest, most humblest guys out there. Insanely talented. And the other thing that I love about him is he just brings an incredible energy to every recording. He's so easygoing. He's the one guy when I'm doing a session that I have to do the least amount of work with.
His timing is insane.
It's insane.
He plays eighth notes so tight that the click is gone.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, incredible feel, incredible energy, just is so positive. Yeah. And charting is a blessing. I just played the song down once and he just charts it and goes in and plays it.
He's a Berkeley kid.
Yeah. He's an amazing musician. So, David, thank you ever so much. I really appreciate it. We're going to do another one of these in the new year because we just scraped the surface. What I might do is bring you a couple of topics on albums that you've done that I love, and you can give me some detail because I think people would love to know. They always love to know how you did things. And you've already admitted and shown us that you keep very, very good notes.
I do. I don't know if I have every piece of gear from everything, but I'm pretty sure I have most of it.
Great.
And what I don't have, we can talk about my plugins next time, so we can go there.
Talk all about your plugins. Thank you ever so much. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you for everything, Warren. It was so much fun. And I'd like to visit your studio, too.
Please.
It looks like we could both get into a lot of trouble and probably not get much work done, but we'd be turning a lot of dials.
Yeah, exactly. Are you going to be at NAMM?
That's in January, yeah? Possibly.
Okay,
yes.
Well, if you're in NAMM, we could interview you then and talk some stuff. Okay. You can check it out. So thanks very much for watching, everybody. Please, as ever, leave a bunch of comments and questions below. Subscribe, go to Produce Like a Pro, sign up for the email list, all of the above. While we're here, David does have a Stephen Slate, has a Slate drum set of drum samples, etc., that you made yourself. Did you do them in your room here?
Yep, everything was done here.
I do want to talk about those because I'm a recent Slate guy. which is pretty hilarious because he lives at the bottom of my street.
Oh, wow.
Can you believe that? He's actually at the bottom of my street. And I just went over there recently and I've just been introduced to his stuff. And you know why? Because of everybody watching this channel. Everybody watching this channel, we will showcase the plugin and they're like, oh, yeah, it's really good. You should review the Slate plugin. You should do this. And then I did some of the drum sample stuff and people started saying, oh, you need to use Slate Trigger. So this is what's so wonderful about doing this is like the people watching educate me just as much as I educate them. So check out David's plugins. I believe your drum one's only like $99.
It's on sale.
Okay, good.
For the Christmas thing. And I also have my Boss Digital compressor and EQ.
Wonderful.
Both of them separate. The Hoser and the Plus 10 dB. They're also on sale in a bundle.
All right, we'll put that on the link as well so people can check out what you do.
When are we going to air this?
In about a week.
Okay.
Pretty quick.
When we edit out all the rubbish. Got it.
Yeah, no, we'll keep in the rubbish, including the bit we just said.
Oh.
It'll be out before Christmas.
Fine.
All right, thank you ever so much for watching, everybody. Thank you, David. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Warren. It was wonderful. I had a lot of fun.
Have a marvelous time recording, mate.
Okay.
Thanks a lot.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.